My next guest has been introducing Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani to some of the city's top business and real estate leaders. That included a meeting yesterday between Mamdani and some prominent business leaders to talk about solutions to the housing crisis, after which he addressed reporters.
I spoke not only about my continued commitment to freeze the rent for more than 2 million rent-stabilized tenants, but also my commitment to asking and understanding the roadblocks that they have faced in building more housing across this city, and how we can ensure deeper levels of affordability, how we can partner in advocating for the resources this city deserves from the federal administration. And I ensured that my door to their feedback, their concerns, and to identifying areas of collaboration will always remain open.
And I'm now joined by Kathy Wylde, who helped broker that meeting. She is the president and CEO of the Partnership for New York City, an influential coalition of some of the city's top businesses. Welcome back to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Bobby.
So tell me about this meeting yesterday. I wonder when you get Zohran Mamdani in the same room with some of these business and real estate leaders, how does that conversation go?
Well, throughout the campaign, actually, we orchestrated a number of meetings with Zohran Mamdani and the mayor-elect. And those meetings generally, I think, go very well. He is, one, a good listener. Two, he's able to communicate in a very substantive way, much more than most politicians, frankly. He knows the facts, he listens, and he has increasingly evolved. And so business leaders are hearing from him. Yesterday's meeting was on housing, and they were hearing his interest in removing barriers to creating housing, in working collaboratively with the banks to figure out how to finance housing in creative ways. So, and talking about when he talked about freeze the rent, I understand we have to reform property taxes and reduce impositions. We have to look at insurance reform. So it's actually a very substantive conversation, not a political conversation, and they like it.
And this came just a few days after Mamdani said something that caused a lot of negative attention, which was the fact that he's not going to continue these police sweeps of homeless encampments, which obviously raised quality of life concerns among some people. Was that something that came up yesterday?
Well, it came up before the meeting because I reached out and said, what do you mean we're going to have encampments? Because I was getting calls, is this going to be Los Angeles or Portland, and what are we doing? And no, it was kind of an unfinished sentence. In other words, he was talking about he wasn't going to proceed with the policies that way they are now. And his position was we want to make sure we find permanent solutions to homelessness and not just move people off of one site where they just go to another site and don't have a solution. So I think it was, once explained, it was not that we're going to put up with having encampments of homeless people around New York City. It's what we're going to figure out a solution and work together to do that. And I think that's what he's been talking about with his Department of Community Safety, that these are not problems that we should lay on the police department to solve. These are larger problems that involve often mental illness and poverty. And there's other ways that we're going to solve these problems. So I think that was a smart way to approach it.
By the way, worth mentioning that you're part of the transition team as Mamdani looks forward to taking office. So, you've obviously been spending a lot of time with Mamdani in another meeting tomorrow, right, on the topic of universal childcare, which I gather is an area of commonality with a lot of people, even in the business community.
Well, I think the business community basically totally shares the priorities of both affordable housing and affordable and accessible childcare. So as employers, these are top of mind. Employers in New York City, because of the high cost of living here, the high cost of rent, they're paying 20–30% premiums on salaries for the same job in another location. So they're very sensitive to the issues he's raising, and what they want to do is be on the table to help solve them. I think the message of both these meetings from our standpoint, from the business standpoint, is that affordability crisis is not solved by the government spending more money. We've got to be a little more creative than that and figure out how do we work together to solve these problems, to bring down costs. Some of it is removal of red tape and regulation, but a lot of it is a reform of our insurance laws, which we have the highest insurance costs in the country. And a lot of that is because we bake into our laws, the way we enforce them is through lawsuits in litigation. And the cost of litigation, the large settlements and claims that come out of our courts, we're #1 in the country. It used to be Florida. And in 2023, Florida reformed their laws. In car insurance, they got rid of no-fault insurance, which is kind of a game where everybody plays because you, regardless of whose fault it is, you get at least $50,000 in New York. So Florida has shown this year, Florida's car insurance companies, the top company, gave back $1 billion in rebates to its customers because so much happened after the reforms that they were able to repay. So this is, save money, bring down the cost of insurance. So there are ways. Insurance is a huge cost for housing. It's a major issue for daycare centers. So we're talking about substantive issues. How do we reduce costs so that the nut that the government has to absorb isn't gigantic? You narrow it down. What are employers doing already? Tomorrow we're going to talk about childcare. What employers are doing already. Many employers are already providing subsidized childcare.
I mean, it sounds like, when you talk, it sounds like there's a lot of agreement with the private sector. I'm curious, when you talk to business leaders, and I know you do a lot of that, I remember a few months ago you said there was a feeling of terror among those in the business community about a Mamdani mayoralty. What do you hear now? What do people say?
So the terror was the night after the primary. I was quoted in the Times the next morning. They said, what's the reaction to the primary victory? And I said, terror. They were terrified because basically all they had heard was negative campaigning against Mamdani, the socialist, et cetera, et cetera. No experience, no this, no that. Nobody talked about Mamdani, the smart young man who listens and takes advice and wants to do the right thing. I mean, that wasn't what they heard. So they were at first terrified, but as they met with him, and he reached out to me the day after the primary and said, who should I meet with? Who should I talk to? And so throughout that process, people heard that this is not a scary person. This is somebody who will listen, we can work with. And so it began to, that sentiment began to tamp down. There are still big issues with the members of the Jewish community who are very concerned about his positions on Israel. And that's, I really can't go any further to say there's still big issues there. But but overall, the impression of his ability to listen, learn, and work with a broader coalition of New Yorkers has reassured people. And the reaction to these meetings that we're having now are, this is a mayor-elect who we can work with.
And on the transition team, talk about your work there a little bit. Are you sort of a liaison with the business community? Are you actually vetting candidates for any particular positions in the administration?
We had a meeting last week of I'm on the Economic and Workforce Development Committee, and we had a 2-hour conversation basically about structure, not about people. And there's follow-up where we're going to follow up on people and specifics on policies. But I can't get into the substance of that. We have all signed non-disclosure agreements, so I'm not saying nothing on that.
Right. Well, we are going to leave it there. Kathy Wylde, Partnership for New York City, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.